what was the brainwashing that was going on? I know that you were treated as less than, but was that the mentality? Was there a hatred there? Was there why was there that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people, I suppose, learn what they taught.
Yeah,
And so
complete brainwashing.
and in their segregated community, look, that whole nationalist movement by the South African Nationalist Party at the time, which put that whole law situation in place from 1948 onwards, was all about whites being the superior race, and
Yeah,
therefore black, colored are less than. And protected in their communities too, because they never had the opportunity to mix with us. Yeah, they lived
yeah,
in areas like Constantia, which is one of the wealthiest parts of Cape Town, and so on. So they never ever saw our world, and we didn't see
yeah,
their world. And I suppose you get taught from young. I suppose just like we were taught as coloreds or as blacks that you stay away from the white folk, you don't trust them. They probably taught the same thing,
yeah.
but they taught that with the privilege that they have and the benefits that they have of being in I suppose, a society where the whites are white as might, right? They had the power, they had the social standing, they had the jobs, they had the money. And so my first experience at the University of Cape Town in my very first class was very strange. And then I went on to I studied English and psychology. And so when I was in the psychology class, I probably encountered a little more friendliness. Maybe there were two people who weren't afraid to come sit either side of me. In English, my English class, English literature I was doing at the time, there were a lot of colored students in that class. So I wasn't as isolated. I didn't feel as isolated. I wasn't like the only one in the class. So that was a lot more friendlier, but also that was I have to say we didn't do a lot of our English classes in that first 6 months because we were on the university steps. We were attending the rallies. That was the group that I knew that was attending the rallies was me. So it was a hostile environment going to uni in that first year. And I only did 1 year of uni at UCT because we migrated the next year to Australia. So I left that behind.
You migrated because of your activism was starting to ramp up and the violence was getting a bit too much for your mum to deal with. You mentioned a moment ago that you were protesting and you got tear gas and you were seeing people getting shot sort of around you. Walk me through a scenario where you were in that situation. What was the reality of attending those protests?
Like I said, a lot of it driven by adrenaline. And when I look back now, I think to myself, that wasn't very smart because we were putting ourselves in danger. We knew what the consequences could be. We had friends who were imprisoned. We had friends who were shot and killed and so on. But I think when you're driven by a certain motivation, passion, anger, all of those things, there can be a lack of wisdom as well. Because I've often looked at people like Mahatma Gandhi and such who protested in very different ways, very strong, passive protest. And I think, I think it was Gandhi who even said, what good is it to the freedom fighter if there's death all around you? You're losing people. How do you continue the cause when you're losing leaders and so on? And so I did eventually change my stance on being so active in the movement. And it doesn't mean I stopped being an activist, but I started to try and figure out how can I get to the point of having conversations and actually seeing if I could educate and influence mindset. Now, that didn't pass for me in South Africa because I left the country. I left the country when I was 20 years old. 20, and came to Australia. And that was a whole other set of challenges to deal with because suddenly I'm dealing with a country that I can go anywhere I want to. I can do what I want to where I want to, but the brain is still looking. Because I remember my cousin had been out here, my two cousins had been out here with their parents probably 5 years before we came out. So part of our migration was leaving because of the violence of apartheid, but also family reunion with my dad's sister who had come out earlier. And I remember going into the city one time with my cousin, and I'm looking around for the trains that says where I can get on. And she's like, you're not in South Africa anymore. But it took a while. It took a while to release all that I'd grown up with, because I was looking for signs. I was looking, where's the colored only cinema? Where's the, and when I think back now, I think, wow, what a way to live, to come to a country that doesn't have that and still be looking for it. And also saying, I want to go back to South Africa, because this new reality in Australia was so difficult and so unfamiliar. And I was like, all the years I've been praying we would leave South Africa, and then I come to a new country and I'm praying to go back. But this was so foreign. Australian life was foreign and very difficult to adapt to.
So that's interesting. So the freedom was so overwhelming that you had a desire to go back to that oppression.
Well, I don't know.
That was what was comfortable.
I don't know if it was so much the oppression. It was the people, my community of, where I grew up with my people. And
I hear a lot of people coming on the podcast and they're saying, well, when you've had trauma, which is obviously what you had, you often seek out the trauma because that's like, it feels normal to your nervous system. So that's why I was like, you wanted to go back to that oppression, because it wasn't, although horrific, it felt normal to your nervous system because you were so used to that stress.
Correct. That's exactly what it is. I've since worked with psychologists and things through those traumatic experiences. That's exactly what we identified, was that the trauma and the impact of it, and how you gravitate towards the familiarity of it.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was very strange to come to a country where suddenly you could do what you want, go where you want. And also the other thing, I was in second year of university and I was at Monash Uni. There's so many things going on. The siblings, all of us were struggling, getting used to life in Australia. My mother was also struggling. She had this anxiety in South Africa, the high blood pressure. She had that year as well, because she was watching her kids struggle to adapt. She was struggling to adapt with no familiar people, all of these things. We had my dad's sister and our cousins, our two cousins. And so we're trying to figure all of this out. The key, we're going to school and to university and so on, and we're trying to fit in, and how do we fit in? And then what was happening with me, I never ever discussed with my siblings to see if it happened with them as well. But with me at uni, people, once they found out where I came from, they were bombarding me with questions. What was it like growing up there? And all of these things. Those who knew about apartheid, they wanted. And when you repeat telling the story and you've just come out of it, it is trauma in itself.
If you haven't dealt with the emotion, so you're not emotional, and when you retell a story, you're not emotionally feeling it, then yes, it can be.
Yeah, it was quite traumatic, because I remember I met this. I was doing Spanish class, I think, in my second year of university, and I met this young Spanish guy, and he was my practice partner when we did the practice speaking the language, and he took me out to a movie one time. Him and a few others, we all went out and the movie we went to see that time was Cry Freedom, and it was about Biko's life and all of, and I was crying. I was sobbing. The guy didn't know what to do with me. The people around me, they're like, oh my God, and he was apologizing, because he didn't know what the movie was about, but he was also quite interested in activism, and he knew it was about the life of an activist. He didn't know it was about the life of a South African activist who I knew I didn't know Steve Biko personally, but he was one of the leaders of the movement, the cry, the struggle, they called it back then. And I was just watching all those scenes again. So I had to have that, and this guy's apologizing. I said, look, you couldn't have known, but he saw the impact of me just watching the movie and how much it ripped me apart, But as you said, I was 20 years old, I was young, I had not dealt with all that trauma. That had never been spoken about. That came years later on top of a whole load of other traumas that subsequently happened in my life. So